Mamsa Pitz Christia, Avgad Hozach Ticha, Mamsa Pitz Christia. אני רוצה להגיד תודה לרוחות, האחוות האותיות העבריות.
Hello and shalom and brachim habayim, which means blessed are the ones who come. And well, it's great to be here again. Eliyahu, Holly, and my dear beloved longtime friend, Pearl Feldman, who is, well, she'll speak for herself, but she's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And she's come back, I mean, she's come back, she come back, I don't know how shall I say it, from the grave, or she's resurrected several times in her life, and we'll get into that a little bit. How are you today, Pearl?
I'm doing very well, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to be part of your show.
Well, the thrill is mine, and the honor is mine, also to have you all here. And, okay, Pearl, that's a South African accent.
That's for sure.
Okay.
I was born in South Africa in 1938. And I've been living in Israel permanently from the day that Mandela was voted into government. I've lived many times, and I always had to go back. But that day was a very special day, and that was the day I could release myself from the country of my birth and be part of this beautiful land of Israel.
But that was a great day. Was that not a great day?
It was a very special day.
A day that you had been working for on the spiritual realms and with different fellow light workers for many years. Isn't that true?
I think it was part of the great plan. And there were many, many groups in South Africa working on the quiet.
Look at them.
From both sides of the color spectrum, from all parts of South Africa. And even today, some of the greatest channelers live and work through South Africa. And I think that it was what was happening in South Africa that was something that really opened the door for what is happening in the world today.
Yes, I think that's right. And I want to get into a little bit of those days, those glorious days, and very hard days as well, in many ways. But let's start at the beginning, Pearl. Tell me about sitting on walls.
Well, when I was a very young child, I believed I was Humpty Dumpty. That was the time of all the nursery rhymes, and everybody sang these songs, and I thought everybody was Humpty Dumpty.
Well, what does that mean, anyway?
I sat on a wall. I never fell, thank goodness, but I would lie in bed as a very young child, and I always knew where the energy portal came in and out of rooms. It was something that I was born with. And I would feel the energy coming in through a corner, and it started moving towards me. And at that time, as I saw the energy coming to me, in my mind, it was my colored sweets, because I wasn't yet really talking very well. I was totally right-brained. And these colored sweets would come out at me.
Colored sweets?
I called them sweets because I didn't know what else to call them.
Okay.
They're like Smarties.
Well, my audience is not going to know what a Smartie is.
Well, it's little colored sweets that the kids love eating.
In England, they'll know. Okay, yes.
And I would feel my body opening up, and like in a blink of an eye, I was sitting on this wall. It was a very meandering wall.
Wait, the wall of your room?
No, the wall of the outside, of the next dimension.
The outside of what? The outside of the house?
The outside of where I was, that's all. I didn't know, I was a baby.
Okay.
I can only explain from what I was experiencing, because I didn't have a left brain. I didn't have any, not at that stage. It wasn't working.
Okay.
But this was from a very, very early age. And it went on until I was about 3.
And you actually remember this?
Well, it was something I did every night. I didn't know that there was anything else. I didn't know that other people just went to sleep. I mean, for me, I would lie in my bed, the portal would open, I would go through it and sit on the wall.
Was there a ledge, or were you just...
It was like a wall, a very slow, meandering wall that you see in the landscape of England. And I would sit there, and before I knew it, there were these coloured lights. They were contained in an egg-shaped shape. I never saw faces. I never spoke in words. But long conversations would take place. And I was like the boss of my wall. I could choose which side I watched. If I watched one side, the lights were like opal. It was like a coloured stone of opal, and it was like there was an exchange of consciousness. I don't know how else to say it. And on other nights, I would lie in my bed and I would feel myself move through the portal, and I would decide I want to sit on that side. And the shape was grey, and I know that I had I believe that I was being taught from angels. But anyway, I forgot all about this until I started seeking spiritual avenues to express myself. And I went to an amazing workshop in South Africa, one that the universe paid for. I just started a job, I didn't have any money, and I won the lottery. Every week there was a lottery, everybody put in a certain amount of money, and one person won it. And I won exactly the amount of money I needed for that workshop.
Okay.
And I went there, and she was an amazing teacher. And we did a lot of meditations. And in one of the meditations, she said, go to the edge of the angelic kingdom.
Oh.
And I was sitting on that wall.
Huh.
And I realized that's where I had been going as a child, because it was identical. And I remembered it. I remembered the actual going. And I think that was exactly when I remembered how I used to go there.
Okay.
It took years and years before I realized, because everybody when I was a kid used to tell me, you've got a wonderful imagination, but it's all imagination.
Yeah.
But I could talk to beings. I would look in a book and I would see a picture of Master Jesus, and we had a conversation. Not a conversation in words, but a mental conversation.
Yes.
And I always felt that he was alive and that he worked with me and he was part of my family. And I saw people when I was a small baby that I remembered when I was about 5, 6. I remembered the day they came to see me.
We're talking physical people here?
Physical people
Okay.
and non-physical people for me were the same.
Okay.
There was no difference, until I got a little bit older. And of course, until I started believing that what I was being able to do was imagination, only imagination. But it really was wonderful. My first memory was I was lying in a pram. I didn't know it was a pram, but I was lying, and there was something...
What's a pram? I mean, I'm from America.
Agala.
Oh, a carriage.
A carriage.
Okay.
And there was a mosquito netting covering my face.
Yeah.
And a hand came and moved the netting away. And I saw 4 people standing there.
Whoa.
One of them was a magnificent woman. I don't remember the other people, whether they were male or female, but her energy and her light was so beautiful that I felt totally drawn heart to heart to this woman. And when I was about 3, she came to visit my mother, and I remembered being in the carriage and meeting. And I always had a very, very soft place for her, but we never had very much contact after that. But it brought back the memory of the first day that I met her.
What a powerful memory. Well,
It was.
I don't remember things from that kind of age.
I think what it is that when you experience something in a totally right-brained way, you're watching the movie and you remember the movie. I've had many experiences like that. Okay, yes.
No.
And one of my most vivid experience like that was when I was 8 years old. I was carried away to sea. And I remember the whole incident.
You mean you were pulled out by like a riptide?
Yeah, something like that. And I watched this whole scene of what was happening, like I was looking down and I was just watching. I was like an observer of myself, my body being taken through. I had cousins of about 10, 11 in the water who tried to hold me and catch me. And they couldn't hold me for very long, and I floated out even more. And I was floating out to sea, and the lifesaver came to save me. And all of a sudden, he must have seen that there was no life force within me, because I know I definitely was out of body.
Okay.
And he started shouting, "You children are all the same. You endanger my life and you endanger the life of others." And I felt myself go, bam, into my body, in his arms, like sometimes we do when we're asleep and we feel that we're falling.
Good. That he screamed at you. That was the right thing to do.
Yeah, he did. And I was fine. And I remember that so clearly. But I have more than that, because I have relived many lifetimes through water. I was doing a course, which I shouldn't have been doing really. It was in Scientology. And the exercise was really a very interesting exercise. You had to be the observer and not to get into your mind or to allow your mind to take you out of what was happening. And the person who was like a coach could say anything to bring you back into your mind. Like if you want to get somebody to react and they're a parent, you just have to say, "You're not a good parent." And all those memories of not feeling that you're a good parent will come flashing into your mind, and you see them and you believe it. And the whole idea, I don't think they do that anymore, but the whole idea at that time was to get you that you don't react. Because the whole concept at that time was we never live in present time. Whatever comes into our life, we are experiencing from past experiences.
Yes.
And it was very powerful. It was one of the most powerful things I think I ever did. And he couldn't get me. He got to the stage where he could say whatever he liked. And he tried, "You're not a good parent," and he tried many different things. And he was getting frustrated. And he put his hands behind his head. I'll never forget this. And he goes backwards and he says, "Pat, pat, 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 pat." That's all he had to say. And the whole experience came back to me.
Which one?
I'm going to tell you. I was in an aeroplane. It was a past life experience.
Oh, my.
I was in an aeroplane. And this aeroplane was a double wing, and I can even today see the struts. And I'm sitting in this aeroplane, and the aeroplane's coming down into the sea, and the engine wasn't working, and it was going pat, 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 pat.
Oh, my.
And in that moment that he said that, I re-experienced that whole lifetime. I re-experienced the fear, and it was like it was happening at that time. And for the next 3 weeks, I was out of things. Nobody knew what was happening to me. I was living in two worlds. Before that experience, I was incredibly afraid of aeroplanes.
Oh, wow.
The first time I flew in an aeroplane, I was green. I swore I would never do it again, but I had to. So every time I was in an aeroplane, I would hold the seat up and I would sing, "Que sera, sera," because I was so afraid. And the fear went. After that experience, it went. But it also gave me an amazing gift. Because after that, I was, when I had that experience in the water the first time when I drowned, When I walked out of the water, I was about 9 years old. But I was totally different because I thought like a boy. I only wanted Meccano sets. I could fix any radio.
Whatever that might be.
Meccano sets are these sets that you put them together.
Okay.
And I could fix any radio. I would take them apart.
And wait, you're saying after he pulled you out of the water, you became more like a boy?
Yeah. You see, these two experiences were tied together. I went into the sea as a male fighting in the First World War.
Okay.
But before that, I had experiences in the sea. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, okay.
So I remember that. I remember that lifetime. It took me time to like get back into this lifetime and remember who I am. I could do anything with radio. And it stopped. The amazing thing is that this gift stopped the day that they invented transistors. I would look at a radio and I didn't know what I was looking at. But up to anything with valves and mechanical things, I absolutely understood what radio was about, and I could fix any radio from the age of 8 until I was about 16.
So, like a male subpersonality started expressing itself after the lifeguard or past life self, sublife personality started expressing itself more strongly in you after he pulled you out of the water.
But I got another one.
All right.
You see, all these things are tied. We don't realize that our lives, all of our lives, are like sequences that move through different dimensions, different times, but we're all connected. It's all part of us. It's part of our soul connection, which we're not normally in touch with. Maybe being born so right-brained, I have been in touch with all these different lifetimes. I've remembered at least 6 or 8 different lifetimes.
You know, that all of a sudden I understood something. I know that I've heard, and I believe it's so, when we've been in a partnership relationship with somebody of the opposite sex and we receive a big trauma, like our partner betrayed us or beat us or whatever it is, and it was a very traumatic thing, and then there's a breakup, very often a person, sometimes, a person will turn to a same-sex partner, like very often lesbian relationships, and I think homosexual relationships, they've just come off, especially with lesbians, they've come off a very hard time with an opposite sex partner. So it's like that trauma caused the type of, a switch to another sub-identity or sub-personality. Does that make any sense to you?
In a way it does, because I would say that what we don't work out in one lifetime, we ask permission to be able to work out in another lifetime.
Okay. So
if you have a male experience that is not worked out.
What do you mean a male? Like
you were in a male body and you couldn't totally cleanse, you still have old stuff from another lifetime. So
it will seek to cleanse in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's fascinating. And so, because we've been traumatized by the opposite sex, then there's some kind of a tendency to go towards same-sex relationship. And even in my own life, not that I've ever had a gay relationship, and that's not my inclination. But when I had a traumatic experience with women, I would just want to hang out with guys. It's like to get back that masculine vibration in a more stronger, more healed place. So for a while, and then I would again started looking for for a woman. But anyway, it popped into my head. I don't know why.
But something while you were talking has popped into my head. When I was young, there was a song called "I'm My Own Grandpa."
Okay.
I'm my own grandpa. And then they would give you some very, very funny ways of being tied to your grandpa, you know. But I think it goes even beyond that, because we could be our own grandfather.
Oh, it happens all.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Edgar Casey says when we reincarnate, we very often reincarnate within the same family line. So you may have been a Feldman many times, and Mia Holly, whatever that means. Who knows what? We adopted when the modern European states came into existence. They made it laws that you had to take a last name, and so that's how we started getting last names anyway. But okay, Pearl, I'd love to talk about your light work in South Africa and your peace work in South Africa, and that's pretty much one and the same thing, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't see it as the same thing, but maybe when we talk, I will see it as the same thing.
Okay. I love the story. I know the story about when you were in a car.
Okay.
And there were a bunch of black guys in the back of a pickup truck. Can you tell us that story?
It was shortly after Sharpeville.
Which was a massacre of whites against blacks, of white police, yes?
No, yeah, well, it was the first real time that the black people got together and they were going to demonstrate. And there was a massacre. And there was a lot of anger. And the black people started burning the symbols. I think they did it before that as well, but it became a very big thing. They would burn the pass books. They would burn people in tires.
Oh, I know.
It really was a very bad time.
Yeah.
It was also a time that something said to me, this is the beginning of the switch. Because up to then, I don't think the black people ever thought that they had a voice. I don't think they ever thought that they could. I mean, there were a few, but as a whole, it just made a big switch. And it was a very dangerous time because a lot of people were being killed, and there was a lot of anger between the blacks and the whites. And at one time, if you drove behind a car with a lot of workers, black workers, and two white people, or a car with white people, there was a lot of bantering. They would talk in their language and say horrible things, and it was
and gestures and so on.
And gestures and things.
And
like
so you were driving right behind one of these
trucks with three black men who were very aggressive. And we had just come from a spiritual meeting. It was a late afternoon. It was an afternoon meeting. And they were, you could feel it. It wasn't just, it was an anger that you could actually feel. And if I would have allowed myself, I think I would have gone into fear.
Yeah.
But I said to the young man in the car who was driving, I said, Robert, this is our great opportunity. Let's not get caught up in what's happening. Let's just give them love. What else? And we started beaming love to them. And you could see that they were saying things, and they weren't saying nice things. I think they were saying really vulgar things. A young man and an old woman in a car. Well, I wasn't old at that time. I was about 30. In a car, and he was about 2 or something. And all of a sudden, something switched. And they started, you could feel that whatever energy that was being thrown at us had changed. And it went back to the old bantering, there were still talking about us and bantering. We wouldn't know what it was, but the aggression was gone. We had absolutely broken this awful anger.
How are you?
And at that time, I knew a very beautiful black man. He was a healer. And the way he would heal was he would take water and put it in a glass and allow the energy to fill the glass, and he would give it to the person to drink. But he was also incredibly clairvoyant. And he could see and he could talk to people and see what their reactions are and see why, whether they're listening, whether they understand. And he had some really amazing healings where a guy would come with crutches and throw the crutches away and walk away.
Whoa.
And I have an incredible story to tell about Jerry and the way he worked. But I'll tell more about the way, the things he would do. Like a man would come and he would say, Jerry, I want you to help me find work. And he would go in and he would say the prayer, and he would see the man's guide standing with crossed arms, shaking his head and saying, And he knew that man didn't really want him to pray for work.
Okay.
Because he didn't want to work.
Okay.
And he didn't waste his time to pray for it. But he would send him away, give him the water, and send him love. And right towards the end, when things really got bad in South Africa, and there were a lot of shootings in the middle of the street, there were taxi wars, and 2 taxis would drive around with AK-47s.
Whoa.
And in the middle of town, they would take them out and just kill them off. And this man came to Jerry and said, Jerry, I have to work in Joburg. I have a family and I cannot not work in Joburg. But I have a terrible fear that I'm going to be killed in one of the taxi wars.
Johannesburg, yes.
Johannesburg. And Jerry did his thing, whatever it was, and gave him the water to drink. And he didn't see him for about 3 months. And one day he saw this man, and the man came to him and said, Jerry, thank you. There was one of the worst of all these shootings was in the middle of Johannesburg. There were 16 people in one of these little combi buses, and only one person survived.
Yes.
And he said, Jerry, I want to tell you that I was in that bus.
He was the one.
And he was the one. And he said, Jerry, let me tell you too, that when the bullets were flying, all I had in front of me was you and what you told me, and I knew that I was going to be all right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What's he doing today?
I don't know. We lost contact. But he did a sangoma, the witch doctor course, which made him work in a different way. And from then onwards, I wasn't in South Africa. And I've tried many times to contact Jerry, but I never could.
Pearl, you have one more story along these lines, which I love and I always remember. The one about stopping at a red light. Can you tell us that story?
Well, that is. It's got two things about that one. I was going through a very big time in my life, and I decided to go to Overeaters Anonymous. And I think the 4th lesson in Overeaters Anonymous is that you had to give over to a higher power. And at that time of my life, I wasn't very connected. And I didn't really believe in a higher power. I was very skeptical, I was very angry, and I didn't believe in this higher power. And during that whole session, I was sitting there and I could feel the anger. And I could feel that I was at a point in my life where I didn't believe that anything else existed. Life was hell. Life was hard. life wasn't worth living. I didn't want to be on the planet. And that's where I was. And on my way home, fortunately, I've always been very intuitive. And I get these messages, and very often it's like I listen to them. And I'm driving along Louis Botha Avenue, which was a very big shopping road and a very dangerous one. There were many, many people killed all along there. Actually, this is the twice I had an experience. You thinking of the first one?
Okay. Well, let's hear them both.
Okay, but this one was when I was so angry and I didn't believe in anything, and there wasn't a higher power. And I'm driving and I see two black ladies standing on the curb near a traffic light. And the light was green so that I could go. And in my head I heard, slow down. And I put my foot on the brake and I stopped just inches before the place where they were standing. But as I was slowing down, the one woman must have tripped on her shoe and she fell flat.
My God.
If I wouldn't have listened to that higher self of mine, and then after that, how could I not believe in a higher power?
Whoa, that's great.
That is a great story.
That's a great story, Carl.
And the other one took place about 3 years before that experience. We had one part of the road which was known as Death Bend. You couldn't really see big trucks in it. They would come downhill, and you were coming out from a side street where there was a traffic light. And the traffic light, I was coming out of the side street, and the traffic light was green for me to go. But I couldn't start my car. My hand wouldn't move. And I was saying to myself, come on, just move your hand, start the car. And I still couldn't move my hand. And I was saying, but you're stupid, man. Just come on, move your hand and start the car. And as I'm arguing with this, a big lorry without brakes comes around the bend. And had I started my car when the lights turned green for me, I would have been dead.
Okay, now I have one more story.
One more?
Which you told me years ago, which apparently I'm remembering. You
and I don't.
Okay. You told me, and I'm sure you're going to, I believe you'll remember now, that it was late at night. Now you remember.
It was in the middle of Hillbrow.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I'm the clock.
I had just come back at night. I had just come back from a wonderful, I'm learning to forget names. From a satsang. I was in a satsang, I'll call it, with an incredible teacher. And they were talking about fear. And they were telling stories of, don't allow yourself to get caught up into the fear. And it was a time when in South Africa, when women who were traveling at night were told, if there's nobody around, don't stop in the middle of the road.
Yes.
You could go through.
Don't stop even at a traffic light.
Yeah, but you had to stop if something was coming. But otherwise, if it was a deserted place, just go through. And I'm traveling, and the light turns green. He turned red, and I stopped. And I'm thinking about what we were speaking about in the satsang. And this woman.
It was a very dangerous area.
It was Hillbrow. At night, at dusk, and nobody around. And this very big woman starts walking towards my car, actually strutting, really strong. And she was like focusing on me. And she came and she put her elbow on top of the car. And she looked me in the eyes. And as she's walking towards me, I see 3 black people coming out of the doorways. And she looks me in the eyes and she says, aren't you afraid? And I was as high as a coot, and I looked her in the eyes and I said, sometimes aren't you ever afraid? And she took her hand and she went like this, and she walked away, and the 3 black men went straight into the buildings, and I happily drove on.
When you told me that story, you said to me that you knew that if you were afraid, it would be the end.
Oh, of course, of course.
And so you had decided in that split second to send her as much love as you could.
Oh, I always do that. You know, it's something that no matter what is happening, I just find that, well, not always, but most times, I have that ability to, I mean, like when kids were cruel to me at school, the only way I found that I could get them off my back was to love them. Because it stopped the game.
So when you looked at her and you gave her your answer.
Yeah.
What was it?
I said, yes, sometimes I'm afraid. Aren't you ever afraid?
And you just looked at her with love.
With love.
It disarmed her.
Yeah, totally. She was waiting for me to show the fear. And had I shown 1 ounce of fear, I don't think I would be here to tell the story.
And you softened her with your look.
I must have. I mean, afterwards I thought about it and I thought, did that really happen or is it my imagination? Even today, you know, when these amazing, wonderful things are happening, everybody, well, not everybody, many people are experiencing the same things as I did in those early years. I still keep asking myself, is it real or is it my imagination? And I realize imagination is real because you cannot imagine something you haven't experienced in some form or another.
Or some lifetime, so they say.
Yeah.
Pearl, I want to, we have on for the radio another quarter of an hour. I want to go into your miraculous resurrections. When I mean, a couple of years ago, when Pearl would barely make it to my house here, she'd be walking on a cane, and she'd be wobbling from side to side, and it looked like any strong wind would blow her over. And now there's no cane. Today it was very windy. She was walking strong, like you got another 10, 15 years, or I don't know. And you say that this is not the first time in your life.
No. This is a continuation of my first resurrection.
What resurrects you, Pearl?
Maybe my ability to see beyond one dimension.
Okay.
I'll tell. I think it's easier to just start telling the story.
Go ahead.
I had been going downhill. This is before I met you.
Okay.
I had been around about 1995. I had been going, if I couldn't walk when I met you, I could even walk less at that time. I was in such agony that every time I put my foot down, I cried. I had 2 bad knees,
Jeez.
but I couldn't breathe. I had no energy. I had no will to live. And it got to a point where I began to realize that if I get any worse, I'm going to be a burden on my children. And I decided that I will never put my children through that. And I remember lying in bed one night and I spoke to the great one that was created me, or whoever it was. I used to call him the man upstairs, a bit much easier. And I said to him, look, you know me, I'm stubborn as all hell. And I have made up my mind that before I get to the point where I have to rely on my children, I'm telling you, I'm going to take myself off this planet, whether you like it or not.
I've been there myself.
And at that point, I remember saying, I don't know what it was that made me change it. And then I said, but on the other hand, if you've got a better way, I'll take it.
What was the other way?
Huh?
So,
Well, let me tell you what happened. My son was going through a very difficult time in a business. And he came to me about 3 weeks, a month, I can't remember the exact time, afterwards. And he said to me, Ma, I know I'm going to lose all my money. And before that happens, you loaned me money for the business. I want you to have some money. And I want to pay for a trip for you to go to America. I had a friend who was like a sister to me living in the States, and he knew that I really wanted to be with her. And he bought me a ticket to go to America to be with her for 3 weeks. But something inside of me said, again, to the man upstairs, look, okay, I'll go, but I'm not going to stay there only 3 weeks. If I'm going, I want to stay longer. And I had worked with autistic children, and I knew of a place in Massachusetts run by Barry Kaufman,
yes.
Who cured his son of autism.
I know the story. There's a great book, which he and his wife wrote about how they healed this son from very serious, the biggest case of autism. It's called Sunrise.
Yeah.
And if you know people with autistic children, I really recommend Googling Susie and Barry Kaufman.
Well, I knew about Barry many years before that when I was working in a home where there were many children, and there was some very seriously autistic children at that time, and there was no place specifically for autistic children. And I was working with this young man, and it was like we were working parallel.
Yes.
And I found that I was working, I had a connection between the work or the way Barry saw autism and the way I saw autism.
Over and over, they succeed in bringing kids out of autism. It's miraculous. Continue.
Okay. And I also got hold of the book Sunrise. And I realized that it was an amazing thing. And just before that time that I was so sick, I worked with another autistic child whose parents took him to Barry's place. And I knew that you could volunteer there.
Okay.
So I decided, okay, I didn't think, how could I walk? How could I do anything? I decided, okay, I'm going to work, volunteer at Barry's place. And I wrote a letter. I told them I wasn't walking so good. And they said, okay, they will accept me as a volunteer. I arrived at Barry's place to find that, and I couldn't walk, to find that where I lived was where I always wanted to live in all my life, is the little wooden house in the middle of a forest.
Okay.
But the place I worked in the dining room was at the top of the hill.
Okay.
And I couldn't walk.
Okay.
I couldn't even walk with a stick.
Okay.
And I had to get to work.
No, how?
I used to take an hour, wherever, as everybody else would walk up that in about 10 minutes. But I started my healing process. And after that...
They say if you want to save your life, give it away. In other words, do something for someone else.
Most probably.
Volunteer.
And after that, I worked at, I lived for 1 year, 2 months at a place called the Kripalu Yoga Center. And that was my most amazing healing.
Famous healers would come from all over the world.
Oh, I met amazing people. Deepak Chopra.
The incredible Barbara Hand-Clough.
Yes.
One of my heroes.
Deborah West. Who came to work afterwards in Israel. We did lots of energy work here. It was an amazing experience. And I used to imagine myself dancing. They used to have 1.5 hours of dance before lunch. And everybody from the area would come and dance. And I used to sit and I couldn't dance. I would either lie on the floor and allow the vibrations of the wood and the music to enter my body, or I would sit on the stage, and when everybody was running from side to side of the room, running through each other with such joy, I would sit there and imagine myself running with the groups of people. And after about a month of, doing this, the guy who started the dance kinetics, or one of them, there were 3 of them, he came to visit. And he walked in at that point when they were doing this. And he walked straight up to me and he kissed me on the forehead. And he said to me in my ear, "I know what you're doing." And I believe that it was trust and visualization and being in such an incredible healing place.
Yes.
That I really started healing.
Yes.
And I came back to Israel and I was almost healed. But being in Israel and being with my stress and being in my life, what happened was by the time I met you, I was going downwards again.
Yes. And now you've risen again, perhaps.
Third time.
And I think it has a lot to do, maybe you would agree, with your work with Jean and John and the dances, for the one dances in Israel, in South Africa that you've done, and your work with Abdi, and I guess many things.
I have worked with some of the best of the best of the best.
Okay.
I've been so blessed.
And I've worked with some of them too.
I know.
This thing about saving your life by giving your life away. I once heard an interview of Barbara Bush, the wife of the former First Lady, wife of George Bush Sr., and it was when George was head of the CIA, and her children had grown up and moved out of the house. And she said, and they were away, everybody was away, and she went into this deep, deep Black depression. She couldn't get out of it. And so she decided she would volunteer at an old people's home. And she started, washing the hair of the old people and doing the work of a basic caretaker as a volunteer. Here's this very rich lady, the wife of this very powerful man who would become president. And she just goes and volunteers at a nursing home and does the work does this kind of work. She said after a couple of weeks, the depression just lifted and it never came back. I always think of that story. She's very impressive, Barbara Bush. Save your life by giving your life away. There's something to that. It's like Jesus said, he who would be the greatest among you must be the servant of all. And anyway, speaking of Jean and John, they opened up their work, and God have opened up something for you that was damaged once. Your singing, your voice.
That is a long story. I need time to tell.
Instead of telling that story, maybe just
sing.
We have
okay.
4 minutes left.
Okay. What I've learned to do is to find my connection with Mother Earth. And I feel the connection of the earth. And as I feel the connection of the earth, and I open my heart to all that there is, I find that I can almost channel or hear sounds of the Mother as she loves her creation.
Ah.
Oh, oh,
Pearl will have to close. Ho, for the people, that all the people may live. Thank you, Pearl.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All listeners and viewers. I will continue with Pearl for another hour or so, and you can watch the rest of it on Elijah's Codes sometime in the future. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Let's take